Hello and welcome to my second behavioral neuroscience video. I'm going to be covering chapter 2.3, which is pages 43 to 50. Brain processes associated with specific cortical lobes. So the occipital lobe processes information from the eyes to create a sense of vision. The auditory information is processed by the temporal lobes. And on the top of the brain, the parietal lobes process sensory information and participate in spatial cognition. The postcentral gyrus is a strip of parietal cortex that receives somatosensory information from the entire body, and the precentral gyrus is a strip of frontal cortex that is important for motor control. Okay, now we are going to be talking about the corpus callosum and brain matter. The left and right hemisphere communicate to create a seamless experience, and this is only possible because of the corpus callosum, and it allows the two hemispheres to communicate. This is a C-shaped figure, and it's made up of axons. Okay, for gray matter, it's found on the upper surface of the brain, and it's dominated by cell bodies, and have no myelin, so no fat. That's why it's not white. White matter found beneath the gray matter is made up of myelin covered axons, so that fatty tissue is why it's white. Okay, so now for the developmental subdivisions of the brain. In a young embryo of a vertebrae, the central nervous system is basically just a tube called a neural tube, and it's filled with fluid. The neural tube is composed of subdivisions that correspond to the future parts of the brain. The forebrain, which is called the prosencephalon, the midbrain, which is also called the mesencephalon, and the hindbrain, which is called the rhombencephalon. So to continue with how the brain develops, 50 days after conception, you have your telencephalon, which is the frontal subdivision of the forebrain, and it includes the cerebral hemispheres when fully developed. You got the diencephalon, which is the posterior part of the forebrain holding the thalamus and the hypothalamus. The mitocephalon is a subdivision of the hindbrain that contains the cerebellum, medulla, and pons. The cerebellum regulates movement. The medulla, the myelencephalon, is continuous with a spinal cord, the brainstem, midbrain, pons, and the medulla. The nucleus, not to be confused with the thing that's in a cell. Nucleus is a collection of neurons within the central nervous system, and tracts are a bundle of axons in the central nervous system. The brain shows regional specialization of function. Our brains are bilaterally symmetrical. Besides the corpus callosum, pineal gland, and pituitary gland, this is true. This is only because there's only one of each. There isn't two on each side of the brain. So the left brain controls the right side of the body, and the right brain controls the left side of the body. Cerebral cortex is arranged in 6 layers, known as the neo or isocortex, the allocortex, which is a few telencephalic structures, and they're made in 3 layers. The pyramidal cell is the most prominent kind of neuron in the cortex, and it's called that because it's pyramid shaped. It contains several basal dendrites, extends horizontally from the cell body, and then the apical dendrite, which is only one of them, extends to the outermost surface of the cortex. Cortical columns are vertical columns that constitute the basic organization of the neocortex. Okay, so the subcortical structures are involved in movement and regulation of motion. The basal ganglia, group of 4 brain nuclei, contain the following: the caudate nucleus, the putamen, the globus pallidus, and the substantia nigra. The limbic system is a group of brain nuclei that innervate each other to form a network. The amygdala serves at the first functions like emotional regulation and odor perception. The mammillary bodies, which is a part of the limbic system. The hippocampus, which is important for learning and memory. The fornix, the fiber from the hippocampus to the mammillary bodies. Then the cingulate gyrus, the olfactory bulb, which is responsible for sense of smell, and the stria terminalis, which is a fiber pathway that runs from the amygdala to the hypothalamus. The diencephalon directs sensory information and controls basic physiological functions. So the thalamus directs sensory information to proper regions of the cortex. The hypothalamus is involved in hunger, thirst, temperature, sex, etc., and controls the pituitary gland. The midbrain has sensory and motor components. So the tectum is the top part of the midbrain. The superior cochlea receives visual information and are involved in visual gaze and attention. The inferior cochlea receives auditory information. The red nucleus, the part of the brainstem, structure related to motor control. And the reticular formation is involved with sleep, arousal, temperature regulation, and motor control. The cerebellum is attached to the pons and is crucial for motor coordination. The cerebellum has 3 layers. Purkinje fibers are in the middle, granule cell below the Purkinje, and the parallel fibers for outer layer. It's the molecular layer as well. Information from the ear first enters the pons via the 7th cranial nerve. The medulla maintains vital basic body functions. The medulla marks the transitional point from the brain to the spinal cord. Damage to the medulla is fatal because it controls breathing and heart rate. Axons passing between the brain and spinal cord go through the medulla. Behaviors and cognitive abilities are determined by functional connections between brain regions. The cortical regions communicate via axon looping. And connecticome is a network map of the brain that describes functional connections. There are different projects right now that are trying to map the brain, and some of these include the Brain Initiative, BAM Project, and Human Brain Project. Specialized support system protect and nourish the brain. The meninges are 3 protective membranes around the brain and spinal cord. I'm going to go over these different layers. The dura mater is the outermost, and it's considered to be tough. Pia mater is the innermost, and it's tight. The arachnoid is a thin covering between and suspends the brain in CSF. Meningitis, which is a terrible disease, is an acute inflammation of the meninges by viral or bacterial infection. Meningiomas is a non-cancerous tumor in the meninges. The cerebral ventricles are chambers filled with fluid. The ventricle system, fluid-filled cavities in the brain. Okay. The lateral ventricle, contained by 4 lobes in each hemisphere. The choroid phalanx is vascular proportion of the lining of the ventricles that secrete cerebral spinal fluid. The 3rd ventricle conducts the fluid from lateral ventricle to the 4th ventricle. The 4th ventricle is the passageway that releases the fluid to surround the brain and spinal cord. That's the end of the video. If you like what you saw, listened to, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.